Good morning, good morning. We're going to have a good time today. All right. So, we're doing 5 things Jesus said that messed everybody up. 5 things Jesus said that got everybody all twisted up inside when he said them. And today, we get to talk about my most and least favorite thing to talk about, which is what did Jesus say about money? Oh, yeah, right? Yeah. Oh, I bet you're just like, yeah, let's talk about money, right? So here's the thing. If you haven't noticed, I don't talk about money a whole lot. Occasionally, I do. We don't make a big deal about giving. I mean, we don't even pass plates anymore. It's kind of a passing thing when you come in to church. And there's a big part of that I don't like the big feature of church to be the money, right? But if you haven't noticed, what we do with money feels deeply personal. Have you noticed that? Have you ever caught yourself, scratching off the little tag? You get somebody a birthday gift. You're like, I don't want to be tacky. I don't want them to know how much I spent. Or, when you go to take in your deposit at the bank. Well, I guess you don't even go in anymore. But, it used to be kind of like, you're filling out the thing. You don't want the guy next to you looking, right? And here's what I notice. It feels deeply personal because it is deeply personal. What we choose to do with our money is basically like a big billboard for what we think is important and what we think isn't as important. That's truth. The thing about math is that math is really bad at lying to you. Did you notice? Like with some parts of your life, you'd be like, well, I guess I'm not as patient as I should be with my spouse, quite as much or a little less or a little more. When you say things like, well, I guess I'm not saving quite as much as I could be, your accountant looks at you and says, well, no, actually you spent like $5,000 at Burger King and you put $48 in your IRA, so there it is. It doesn't stretch much. You can't insert a lot of adjectives. It just is what it is. And the other thing about money is that it is made up of, amongst other things, time. And the thing about time is, it's really annoying because it's limited. You have a limit. Everybody in this world has a limit on how much time you will have in order to make more money. And here's the kicker, you don't even know how much time you actually have. It's ticking out from under you all the time. So there's that. So that's one of the reasons I don't rush to talk about money. It feels deeply personal because it is deeply personal. But there's another reason, and maybe you've seen this too. I have seen some churches do some pretty funky things with money. You can laugh anytime you want to. I'm with you on this, okay? I've seen some stuff. You've seen some stuff. My favorite all time is I started tithing and then I got a beach house. Like the testimonial. Like I started tithing and then I got so much more money, so you should tithe too because you're going to get rich. And I'm like, that's not really, there's something a little off about that. I mean, maybe the story is true, but why are you telling that story? What are you doing here anyway? And of course, when you don't trust that people are being forthcoming with you, you tend not to trust them at all, which is too bad because they're supposed to be here to give you true things about the most important things in life. I've seen all kinds of stuff happen, okay? All kinds of stuff. I've seen churches, and I wish it wasn't anything I knew firsthand, but I do. I've seen churches where the pastor was the bookkeeper, was the treasurer, was the paymaster, right? I don't have to spell it out for you. That's not a good plan. Well, I just decide what I should be paid from week to week to week. Do ya? Not a good idea. Not a good idea. I've seen churches where the pastors, use church funds to sort of support their own personal business stuff, and then that doesn't quite go the way it's supposed to, and then that turns into, that's a big mess too. You don't want to be doing that. You don't want to be hearing about that. I've seen worse. You've probably seen worse. So, before I let Jesus loose on money and giving and all that good stuff, I'm just going to tell you a few things, hopefully, that just kind of put your mind at ease, help you just breathe a little bit. Okay? I've seen some things, you've seen some things, so let me tell you some things, all right? Here's one. I have no idea how much any individual in this church gives. No idea. I don't plan to. I don't want to. Why? Because when pastors know who gives more and who gives what and who gives less and who doesn't give, they are tempted to treat people with favoritism or the opposite of favoritism. Neither one of those things belongs in the kingdom of God. So we have a bookkeeper, and she's wonderful. She is professional. She has a degree in accounting. She sees it all coming in. She sees it all going out. The treasurer sometimes looks over her shoulder, but I have no idea what's going on in there. And it's been that way for a long, long, long time. Here's another thing. We believe in this church in transparency with finances. So, every year we have these two meetings. There's a semi-annual and annual. There are business meetings, and our people put together a treasurer's report. It looks, from where you sit, kind of like this. You see all the budget items. You see all of what happened, what's been happening, what the trend is, what's going to happen if we don't have enough, all that good stuff. And we give these out to people, believe it or not. You just get to take them. And if anybody wants one here today, I will give you one. I have a whole bunch left over from our last spring meeting. They have not been doctored or amended since. They're just the way that they are, okay? And we have them left over, and I hope you take them so we can't say that we wasted a lot of paper. The other thing is, here's transparency for you, all right? I'm talking about me. No, you can't talk about you. Yes, I can. Here we go. I'm not broke. I'm not a rock star either. There you have it. You guys pay me like $50,000 a year. I'm on a salary. Some of you are like, you need more money. Well, maybe, I don't know. I seem to be okay. I seem to be doing all right. My wife makes a little bit more on the side, doing some music lessons and some stuff with kids, and that's fun. But here's the thing. I have no debts either. So I don't make a ton of money. I have no debts. I have 2 cars, Toyota, Subaru. I'd love a Porsche, but that's, whatever. Actually, we're going to talk about cars a little bit toward the end. It's kind of personal. It's just what it is. My wife did crazy things with me a couple of years ago. We got our house paid off, which is like, whoa, nobody does that, right? It happened. That's a real thing that happened. So, I have my pros and my cons. I have great benefits. I have great challenges. I cut my own firewood every year for heat. Saves like $3,000-$4,000. It does. We shop around for auto insurance. We do things. We eat out a little bit. We don't eat out a ton, right? Okay, so I'm saying all these things to you just to let you know that I'm not one of those dudes that's like here to make bank off the church, right? Now maybe you weren't suspicious of that at all. I don't know, but that's not really what we are about. All right, so we're just kind of boring on paper. We're really boring. We have like 2 or 3 subscriptions to some things that don't cost much, and the rest we're trying to save money. We believe in saving money. We try to do the whole 10-20 live on the rest thing. 10-20 live on the rest. Give 10, save 20, live on the rest. That's what we're trying to go for. We're not always successful. Okay, sometimes things pop up that we did not expect. I'll share a little bit more about that with you, kind of a personal story at the end, but that's kind of what we're going for. So, here's the thing, same deal with the church. You're like, oh, you're going to talk about church finances? I'll just get it right out front. Here we go, you ready? So our church is kind of the same deal. We have a lot of advantages. We have a building here. Guess how much we owe on the building? Nothing. We owe nothing on this building, okay? Bought and paid for like a bazillion years ago, right? We have a lot of things going for us. We have a great staff in the school that makes I mean, they make blood from stones. I don't know how they do it, but they do it. I guess Jesus must be in that somehow. You know, we have something going for us in this church we have not had going for us in quite a long, long time. I'm not sure if ever, really. We have this capital fund because of all the craziness that happened in the pandemic. We have a capital fund available to us to actually start the final and most sought-after building project we've been talking about for years and years, okay? Quite a lot of capital, about $150,000, I think, $150,000. Sitting there at the ready for this project, okay? We also have a budget. We're budgeted for $5,150 per week. That's what it takes, supposedly, to do what we've been doing the way that we've been doing it. Now, lately, we have been coming under that a fair amount, actually, by about $650 per week. We have not yet met our budget. I'm hopeful that will, be on the uptick as we get closer to our fiscal year end, but I never know what's going to happen. We've been in worse shape, we've been in better shape. That's just kind of how it is. That it is what it is. So, now, see, I put it all on the table for you. Now you got no excuse. Now it's just really about you and Jesus and everything in between. All right? So hopefully that helps. So, here's the question that people really want to know, but are most afraid to ask in church, which is, how much am I supposed to give? Like, how much really? Like, when I was a kid, I went to this small little old country church, and, they had the old plates, they passed the plates around, and that was how it was. Been doing it for 100 years that way. And so my auntie, who brought me to the church, would always give me like a dollar bill. Or like a $2 or something, or some quarters or something, supposed to teach me to put the thing in the plate, and this is how it works, right? Okay, so that's what I did. But, you get to a certain age where you're starting to do the calculations, like, well, wait a minute, there's like 40 people in this church, and how much does it cost to heat, and how much, don't we have to pay the organist, and, you're like, well, if everybody's only given $2, but how are you supposed to know how much, and so, at some point, you may or may not have grown out of that, but that's a real thing that people still wonder. What am I supposed to give? Now, the traditional answer, the one that you hear most often about in church settings, is what? 10%. The tithe, right? They talk about the tithe, right? A tithe. What is a tithe? Is it good tidings toward men? Or what are you talking about? A tithe really just means this. It is the first tenth, okay? Some people just say, well, it's a tenth. No, it's actually the first tenth. That was always the way that it was. Just to make sure that the tenth actually happened, they did it first. And there was some things that preceded this, but it started way back before Jesus came, when God first pulled the Hebrew people out of Egypt. He reestablishes them, or prepares them to be reestablished as their own independent nation. And so he's basically putting all these structures and operations into place to prepare them to be their own people group, but to be able to maintain spiritual order in their nation. And so they have this whole system that God set up of sacrifice, and they have a tent. They didn't have a temple yet because they're still mobile. They're still in the desert. So they get this thing called the tent of meeting, right? Big, not just a little camp tent either. This is a tent, right? And so we find in Numbers, here's God, outlining the whole thing. He says, I give to the Levites, that's one of the 12 tribes of Israel, okay? This is one of the tribes who can trace their lineage back to one of Joseph's brothers, okay? And he says, I give to the Levites all the tithes in Israel as their inheritance in return for the work they do while serving at the tent of meeting. It is the Levites who are to do the work at the tent of meeting and bear the responsibility for offenses against it. So basically, they're kind of like pastoring this group. This whole nation, right? And everybody, you didn't really get to choose. Everybody that's a member of this lineage, you guys get this job. This is what your life is about, right? And he says this is a lasting ordinance for the generations to come. They will receive no inheritance among the Israelites. Instead, I give to the Levites as their inheritance the tithes that the Israelites present as an offering to the Lord. Basically, you guys are going to do this job, and you're not allowed to do any other job. You're not going to own farms. You're not going to run wineries. You're not going to do any of these other things. You're only allowed to do this work which I give you. And what's kind of interesting about this, and don't freak out, because some of you are already freaking out, look at 10th, like Home Alone face, slap, right? Is that a couple things come out of this that really nobody thinks about. Don't do that, honey. Come on. A statement is made here. Nobody picks up on it, hardly. It's that if God asks you to do something, He makes a plan for you to have what you need to do it. He does not look for blood from stones. Levites. I'm sure the Levites were kind of thinking, wait, we don't get to own any land. We don't get to pass any land on to our kids. We're just going to rely on people's generosity? I mean, everybody's just going to be honest about what's coming in? I mean, is that how it's going to work? I'm sure they thought that. But if God asks you to do a thing, He makes a plan for you to have what you need. And here's the flip side of that. It's the same lesson for everybody that was a part of it. He said, if God asks you to do something, He makes a plan for you to have what you need. He sets this thing up. And of course, all these people are thinking the same thing. If I give my first tenth, I mean, how do I know at the end of the month there's going to be enough? And wait a minute, who set this percentage anyway, right? That's a little scary, right? It surely is for Americans. It surely is. I'm not trying to twist anybody's arm here. I'm just telling you this is the history. This is what happened. This is what they did. And they did it faithfully for centuries. Centuries. Now this is all way before Jesus. Centuries and centuries and centuries and centuries and centuries before Jesus. And then Jesus shows up. And I don't know if you remember this about Jesus, but Jesus starts talking, and when he starts talking, when he starts teaching, a lot of the things that Jesus says don't exactly sound like they line up with what people had been taught over years and years. He talks a lot about good things and righteousness and honesty and integrity and all those things. He says he stands for all those things. But then he talks about forgiveness sometimes in the same breath. He talks about generosity. He talks about giving. And a lot of people listen to this and they hear what Jesus is saying and they start to get the impression that Jesus guy is just all kind of loosey-goosey about a whole bunch of important things that they've taken as very important for, forever. Like, what's up with this guy anyway? Is he just throwing everything out that we were taught? I mean, is that how this works? And what's really interesting, is that Jesus says, don't think that I've come to abolish the law or the prophets. I've not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. What does that mean? Turns out what it means is Jesus is going to take your life in the same direction as all those old commands was sending it, but He's going to take it further. He's going to do more than what we imagined. He's not here to reverse how God felt about everything. He's here to complete the job. Yeah. And in a minute, you're going to see why everybody's all twisted up and freaked out every time Jesus talks about giving. So here's Jesus. He's just finished talking to a bunch of children. Actually, a bunch of children swarmed him. And I think all the pictures show him sitting under the shade of some tree or something, giving them the lessons. And, don't keep the little children away. And all true, right? But this is what happens as he gets up to leave. It says, as Jesus started on his way, a man ran up to him and fell on his knees before him. Good teacher, he asked, what must I do to inherit eternal life? Think about that. He runs up to him and fell on his knees in front of him. What do I got to give? What have I got to do? What's the thing? Give me the minimum. What is the minimum I must do? Jesus says something to him to clarify what being good really is about. And then he says this. He says, you know the commandments. Do not murder. Do not commit adultery. Do not steal. Do not give false testimony. Do not defraud. Honor your father and mother. He even says a couple others, some of the other accounts. Mark didn't get them all down. Teacher, he declared, all these I have kept since I was a boy. That's pretty impressive. That's pretty impressive. That's true. That's true. I don't know if it's totally true. But the guy's heart was definitely that he wanted it to be true. Must have given it his all. And this is what said Jesus looked at him and loved him. Compassion. I like this guy. I like him a lot. One thing you lack, he said. Just one. Go sell everything you have and give to the poor, and you'll have treasure in heaven. Then come, follow me. Ah. What? What? That's terrifying. Come on, are you with me? What is he what? Yeah. And you're going to see in a minute, he says this knowing that he's actually a very well-off young man with a prestigious position. He says, it's simple. This is the thing that's lacking in your life. You have done well at not doing anybody any harm for your whole life. I'll acknowledge that. You've been honest. You've honored your parents. You haven't defrauded anybody. You haven't stolen. You haven't done all the naughty things. All the things I said don't do. You haven't been doing them. Wonderful. There's further to go. Are you ready? Come with me. Come with me. And you got all this stuff. So go get rid of all the stuff. You're not going to need this stuff anymore. You're going to be with me. We're going on the road, man. Traveling ministry. You can't be owning property and running a farm and you're not going to be doing all that stuff anymore. So just sell it, okay? And I don't exactly know how much he was supposed to give to the poor, but I'm sure if I researched it a little bit more, I could probably figure out there's probably like kind of minimum offering on a windfall or a sale of property. I don't exactly know if he's supposed to give it all, every bit, but he says, sell all your stuff and then give to the poor, which is good. And it's going toward the ministry, and basically then you're going to come with me and we're going to go on the road. And of course, it says, at this the man's face fell. I mean, the pallor just went out of him. He went away sad because he had great wealth. Now, I'm going to pause the scriptures right there and say a couple of things more. A lot of people look at that and they go, well, this is the new rule. You got a house, you got a car, you got a thing, you got a cool jewelry box or, whatever, wedding ring, or you're supposed to go and sell it, and you're not supposed to own any property, and we're supposed to all move into a commune together, and, that's really not what's going on here. What is going on here is Jesus is saying, look, the one thing that you lack is just to rearrange your entire life around the will of God for ministry. The whole thing. This is a man, if he's really this kind of a guy, he was tithing. He was already tithing. He was faithfully giving his 10%. He showed up at the temple. He put the right amounts in the right boxes. And I'm sure he was very used to that. He'd probably grown up with it as a boy, like he said. And probably he did just like any normal person might do. He said, I gave my 10%, so the other 9/10 is what? It's mine. We'll just do whatever I think is good as long as it doesn't hurt anybody. Right? Right. And Jesus is saying, well, actually, 10/10 is really mine. 10/10. I'm asking you to rearrange your entire financial life around the will of God. The whole thing. The whole thing. It's going to look a little bit different to every person, right? Because the same specific will of God is not the same specific will for every single person. It's not. So right away, you could chalk off that whole, looking over your shoulder thing to see what everybody else is doing. Like, keep your eyes on your own journey, buddy. Looking over our shoulder is usually an excuse to kind of like justify, what we really would like to do. And if they got a boat, I'll get a boat. Or they got a thing, or they got a thing. No, you're supposed to keep your eyes on the will of God for you, which only truly you can be convicted about. Yeah, I said that. Not always easy, but there it is. So what you do is you take and look at everything that God has allowed you to get. Resources, assets, liability. You look at all the thing. And you start to ask new questions. You say, well, how does this help? How does this help the kingdom move forward? How does this choice I make help me become a better Christian? How does this choice I make my family better? How does this lead to deeper understanding for my family or for my spouse or for the gospel or for this project? How does this help, the mission? How does this help? You see, when you start to commit your life to Christ, you have a new accountability. You say, my whole life is Christ, so how does my whole life reflect that decision? Yeah. And suddenly, all of the math is forced to justify itself. Okay. I laugh because it's intense. It's intense. He says this, he says, children, how hard it is to enter the kingdom of God. It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. He's acknowledging, this is not easy. This is not easy. And actually, the more that you have, the less easy it feels. Because the more that you have, there's more of it to pull at your heartstrings. And say, take care of me, watch me, make sure you still have me at the end, make sure you don't lose me, make sure you don't risk me, make sure I have, and it just, it's powerful. And I would love to say that, nobody is rich, so we don't have to worry about it. Truth is, if you live in America, if you expect to eat tomorrow, you're probably rich. If you could go to the hospital and expect to get care with a problem that you have, you're kind of rich. Truth of the matter. It's pretty hard not to be rich. By comparison to the rest of the world, I mean, as bad as you may think the economy feels right now, the truth is, still doing pretty good. So the boys say this kind of collectively. They said, well, who then can be saved? And this is a good guy. You don't meet guys like this very often. He's a good dude. I mean, if this dude is struggling, what hope is there for the rest of us? And he says something that's been repeated many, many times. With man, this is impossible, but not with God. All things are possible with God. Can a person really adapt this area, this consuming area of their life to the will of God? On our own power, no. no. The force is too strong. The pull is too real. But Jesus says, but all things are possible with God. If you take the steps with God, God will actually reformulate you from the inside out, and He will work with you. He will work with you like clay, and He will ratchet you up bit by bit by bit. You may not be, I'm telling you, it's hard. If you're just kind of like living life and just doing your thing, and you're just kind of reacting to things and not really planning to do anything special and just kind of going, it is overwhelming, the thought of like, I'm going to rearrange my entire life around the will of God, especially with finances. Ugh. Whoa, go see a professional or something, right? But Jesus says this, He says, well, actually it'll be a fight, but it's totally doable. Because God is going to be with you in it. That rich young man goes home. We don't learn about what happens to him after he goes home, but my bet, honestly, is that he goes home and he weighs things. And he weighs them some more. And he weighs them some more. As time goes on, as Jesus is crucified and then resurrected, I'm not sure how much time passes between then and there, but I'm believing actually that young man eventually did find help through God to make the choice that his heart desperately wanted to make. And God has an amazing way of guiding you to becoming different in some of the places you never thought you could grow in. So, I'm going to ask Micah, would you pause the stream? Would you do that? Let me know when you give me a thumbs up. Thank you. I'm going to tell you kind of a personal story, and that's just my little